And in Ottawa, officials say this crisis marks a permanent shift, with sovereignty first and strategic independence over silent compliance.
Breaking tonight, Canada has calmly rejected midnight tariff threats from a powerful ally, proving patience can outmaneuver pressure.
Breaking tonight, Mark Carney just revealed what nobody saw coming. Trump sent middle-of-the-night texts. Ottawa responded with silence. And the Prime Minister, who Wall Street said would crumble under pressure, just demonstrated exactly why Canadian patience is reshaping North American power dynamics. Tensions are exploding across the continent tonight. America expected capitulation through tariff threats, but instead of economic surrender, Ottawa accelerated strategic independence. Everyone believed Canada's proximity to Trump would force compliance. Financial analysts expected Carney to bend within weeks. Political experts assumed the Bay Street banker would negotiate away Canadian sovereignty for market stability. They were all utterly, catastrophically incorrect. Ottawa, November 2025. Mark Carney sits across from Toronto Life, and what he reveals in this conversation changes everything we thought we knew about how power actually works between these two nations. The texts from Trump started arriving. Middle of the night, early morning, all caps, exclamation marks, no apparent sleep schedule. And Carney's response? Measured, deliberate, unshakable. This isn't about one interview. This is about the fundamental collapse of intimidation as a strategy and the rise of institutional resilience as the new currency of influence in North America. Let me take you inside what actually happened in those conversations between Washington and Ottawa. Because what Toronto Life uncovered reveals why Trump's negotiating playbook, the same tactics that worked on CEOs and contractors, is failing spectacularly against Canadian institutional discipline. Dear viewers, the Prime Minister of Canada just told the world that Donald Trump texts like a teenager. Caps lock, exclamation marks everywhere, 24/7 messaging with zero regard for time zones or sleep. And here's what makes this revelation so significant. Carney shared this detail with Toronto Life not to mock Trump, but to demonstrate something far more important about how Canada is navigating this crisis. Trump offered his number during their first Oval Office meeting. The gesture itself was classic Trump, establishing immediate personal communication channels that bypass diplomatic protocols and institutional guardrails. For Trump, this is leverage, direct access, the ability to pressure, persuade, or intimidate without witnesses or records. He's done this with business partners, political allies, foreign leaders. It's his signature move, but Carney understood immediately what this really represented. Not privilege, not partnership, vulnerability. Because when Trump texts at 3 a.m. demanding concessions or threatening tariffs, institutional Canada has already wargamed 12 scenarios and prepared 8 response options. By the time Trump hit send on that all-caps message, Ottawa's already 3 moves ahead. Toronto Life asked Carney about his negotiating approach with Trump. His answer revealed everything. We're not going to sign a bad deal. We're not even going to sign a good deal. We're going to sign a great deal for Canada. Translation? Ottawa just told Washington that Canadian sovereignty is non-negotiable. And what happened next demonstrates exactly why patience, not pressure, wins these confrontations. Let's rewind to October 2025. Carney walks into the Oval Office surrounded by 75 American press members, 10% Canadian media, 90% domestic audience, and Trump starts performing. He calls Canada the 51st state. He talks about American interests. He dominates the conversation because that's what he does in that environment. Analysts watching this encounter declared Carney weak. They said he deferred. They criticized his measured tone as capitulation. They were completely misreading the situation. Because here's what actually happened. Carney recognized he was in Trump's theater, surrounded by Trump's audience, with Trump controlling the staging. Fighting for attention in that moment would have been exactly what Trump wanted. Confrontation gives Trump energy. Disagreement becomes content for his base. Pushback turns into ammunition. So Carney did something that drives Trump absolutely insane. He showed respect for the office, maintained composure, and refused to engage in theatrical combat. When Trump suggested Canada could become the 51st state and said, "Never say never," Carney responded with 4 words that ended the conversation. Never, never, ever. Not aggressive, not defensive, just absolute clarity delivered with the kind of institutional confidence that cannot be intimidated because it doesn't depend on personality or performance. It depends on principle. Toronto Life pressed Carney on this dynamic. How do you sit there while Trump twists data, mocks your nation, and repeatedly calls you Mark while hating when people call him Donald. How do you hold your tongue for the greater good? Carney's answer revealed the entire strategy. In the Oval Office, with American press present, Trump is speaking to his domestic audience about domestic issues. Interrupting would accomplish nothing except giving Trump what he wants: conflict that he can spin as Canadian aggression or weakness depending on what serves his narrative that day. But make no mistake, Toronto Life noted, when it comes to Canada specifically, you do see respect in those settings. Carney confirmed it. We're not the 51st state there. He wishes that we would be part of the United States. In the Oval Office, when he said, "Never say never," I said, "Never, never, ever." That moment, that exchange, represents everything Trump doesn't understand about negotiating with institutional democracies. You can bully individuals. You can intimidate business partners. You can leverage personal relationships. But you cannot text message your way through centuries of Canadian institutional culture that values patience, process, and principle over personality and pressure. Dear viewers, between October and November 2025, something extraordinary happened in Canadian-American relations. Washington pushed too hard. Ottawa said no. And then Mark Carney, the Bay Street banker who Wall Street thought they understood, became the leader that reminded America exactly why Canadian resilience reshapes negotiations, while American intimidation collapses. The pattern was identical across every interaction. Trump would threaten tariffs. Carney would reference institutional process. Trump would demand immediate responses. Carney would emphasize stakeholder consultation. Trump would text in the middle of the night. Carney would respond during business hours. This isn't passivity. This is precision. And it's driving Trump absolutely insane. Because here's what Trump fundamentally miscalculated. Mark Carney isn't just some prime minister who got lucky. Toronto Life traces his path from Fort Smith to Edmonton to Toronto to New York to London to Ottawa. This is someone who rebuilt financial systems after the 2008 collapse, who navigated Brexit as Bank of England governor, who managed currency crises and sovereign debt negotiations and central bank coordination across multiple continents. Trump thinks he's negotiating with a politician. He's actually negotiating with someone who spent decades mastering exactly the kind of institutional leverage that Trump's personality-driven approach cannot comprehend. Toronto Life asked Carney about his Bay Street years, living in Forest Hill with a 6-week-old baby, working in Toronto's financial district. The interviewer suggested Carney left because he grew tired of materialism and Rolexes. Carney pushed back. "I always expected at some point to do some form of public service. That was bred in the bone for my family." That distinction matters enormously. This isn't someone who abandoned the private sector because it disappointed him. This is someone who always intended to use private sector expertise for public benefit. Trump spent his career monetizing relationships and maximizing personal leverage. Carney spent his career building institutional resilience and systemic stability. When these two approaches collide, Trump expects his tactics to work because they always have before. But institutional Canada doesn't negotiate like a contractor hoping to get paid. Canada negotiates like a democracy that answers to citizens, not shareholders. And that completely breaks Trump's playbook. Toronto Life revealed another critical detail. Carney told them straight, "Our relationship won't get back to what it was. We've learned a lesson as Canadians on the dangers of close integration." Translation: Ottawa just told Washington that the era of assuming American reliability is over. Permanently. This is the most significant shift in Canadian foreign policy in 75 years. And it happened because Trump's approach taught Canada exactly why sovereignty cannot depend on proximity or partnership with an unreliable power. America wanted Canada to be more integrated. Trump's tariff threats and 51st state rhetoric achieved the exact opposite. Canada is now strategically decoupling, not because of anti-American sentiment, but because Trump demonstrated that America cannot be trusted as the foundation for Canadian security or prosperity. And here's the absolutely remarkable thing. Carney delivered this truth to Toronto Life with the same calm, measured, institutional tone he uses in everything. No anger, no resentment, just clear-eyed acknowledgement that the relationship changed and Canada adapted accordingly. Toronto Life asked about Pierre Poilievre. Can you compliment him? Carney's response was perfect. His hair is impeccable. He's a hard worker. He loves his family. That's not dismissive. That's institutional respect for political opposition while refusing to engage in personal attacks or partisan warfare. It's the same discipline Carney applies to Trump. Acknowledge the person, respect the position, but maintain absolute clarity about principles and priorities. The interview revealed something else crucial about how Carney operates under impossible pressure. Toronto Life asked, "What's the best perk of being Prime Minister?" Carney's immediate answer was meeting Canadians coast to coast. The interviewer pushed back, "That's too easy. Give us something else." Carney's second answer revealed everything. Having the resources of the country to make a sound decision, I could form a table, I could talk to people, I could get others to study it. There aren't many roles like that. That's not a politician giving a rehearsed answer. That's someone who genuinely values institutional capacity and collaborative decision-making. It's the opposite of Trump's approach, where decisions emerge from impulse, instinct, and whatever mood strikes at 3 a.m. Toronto Life pressed on the hardest question. With Trump, tariffs, immigration, the economy, unemployment, Ukraine, AI, the Middle East, the auto sector, Alberta threatening secession, approval ratings, and re-election ahead, is it possible to turn off? Carney's answer, no, is the short answer. But then he described going for a run that morning, maybe not thinking about policy issues for part of it, focusing on crossing the road without getting hit by a car. And then Toronto Life landed the perfect line. "And then Trump texts, right?" Carney laughed. "That's why you have to put your phone on silent mode." That exchange right there, that tells you everything you need to know. Carney runs in the morning trying to clear his head, and even then he's thinking about crossing the street safely because there's literally no moment when the weight of this job lifts. The midnight texts keep coming. Trump keeps treating Canadian sovereignty like some disposable bargaining chip, and there's no off switch for any of it. But Carney's response isn't stress or panic or capitulation. It's institutional discipline applied to personal routine. Silent mode, meditation, morning runs, measured responses during business hours. Trump thinks volume equals victory. He's built his entire brand on breaking things, making noise, dominating every room he enters. That approach worked in real estate. It worked in reality TV. It's worked in American politics for nearly a decade now. But Toronto Life's interview reveals exactly why Trump's approach is failing. You cannot text message your way through Canadian institutional culture. You cannot intimidate someone who spent decades managing financial crises and sovereign debt negotiations. You cannot bully a democracy that values process over personality. Mark Carney entered office during an unprecedented crisis. Decades-long partnership with America unilaterally ruptured. Alberta threatening secession. Critical minerals trapped in indigenous land disputes. AI racing ahead while safety falls behind. And a party that's popular while its leader fights for every approval point. Toronto Life chose Carney as their most influential person of 2025, not because he's perfect, but because he represents something bigger. Canada, because of what we represent as a country, what we believe in, what we're fighting for. That's not political rhetoric. That's institutional identity. And it's exactly why Trump's pressure campaign is collapsing, while Canadian resilience is reshaping North American power dynamics. Because when Trump texts at 3 a.m. demanding compliance, institutional Canada has already prepared the response. When Trump threatens tariffs, Ottawa has already diversified partnerships. When Trump treats sovereignty like a toy, Carney responds with 4 words: never, never, ever. The banker from Bay Street, who Wall Street thought they understood, just demonstrated why Canadian patience, precision, and principle defeat American intimidation, impulse, and instability every single time. And Trump, sending those middle-of-the-night texts with caps lock and exclamation marks, still doesn't understand why his playbook stopped working the moment it encountered someone who refuses to negotiate like a contractor hoping to get paid.